Hello guys, welcome to my YouTube channel. In today's video I'll be teaching us how to cut a pant trouser, and the pant trouser will have band at the waist and also side pocket. So the first thing to do is, the length I'm working with, the length of the pant is 41 inches. So, and I'll be using 2 inches for the height of the band. So that means I'm going to minus 2 inches from 41 inches. So I'll be left with 39 inches. So 39 inches plus 1.5 for the hemming allowance, then half inches here, then I have 2 inches. So 2 inches plus 39, I have 41 inches. So now when you are taking your measurements, make sure you minus the 2 inches for the waist, you minus it upward. So because I have my half an inch seam allowance here, when you want to minus the 2 inches, you bring it down below the half an inch seam allowance here. Can you see? So from there I took the hip line, so hip line, and this is the crotch line. To determine your crotch line, you can just sit on a flat surface and measure from your waist, from where you want your trouser to start, where you want to be placing your trouser, up to the flat surface you're sitting on. Or better still, you can divide your hip divided by 4. So the quarter of your hip is going to be your crotch line. So the crotch line I'm using is 10 and a half. Okay, so, and this is the 2 inches for the band that I took upward. Then the tie line, which is usually 3 inches below your crotch line. So, and also I have the starting point line on this side. I marked the allowance about half an inch. So you can mark 1 inch, you can mark half an inch, but I think half an inch is okay because we are still going to be adding extra allowance to the back. So from there, now I'm going to take the quarter of the hip measurement. So the quarter of the hip measurement I'll be placing here. I'm just going to stop at the crotch line. So the quarter of the hip measurement, the hip I'm working with is 42 inches. So 42 divided by 4, you have 10 and a half. So you measure the 10 and a half from your crotch line up to the waistline. So that's how you're going to measure. So this is the quarter of my hip. So, and the line you have here will now serve as the center line. Okay, this is going to be the center line. So now, to determine your crotch extension, just measure what you have at the crotch area here, and the crotch line here, which is the quarter of your hip. Measure what you have here, which is the quarter of your hip measurement, and that is 10 and a half divided by 4. I have 2¾ so 2¾ is going to be your crotch extension. Okay, that's going to be your crotch extension. So now, in order to know how much fabric you need to fold, you'll be using half of your tie line. Okay, you are dividing your tie divided by 2, but your hip is divided by 4. So you use your tie line measurement plus whatever allowance you want to add. That's going to determine how much fabric you'll be folding around here. So the next thing now is to determine this the center of what you have at your crotch extension. You know, this is the crotch extension now. So now from this crotch extension to this side here, you measure what you have there and you determine the center line. So what I have here is 13 and a bar. So that means what I'll be needing is 6 and a half and a bar. So you're going to be placing, so that's 6 and a half. So now you'll be placing the 6 and a half like this. Okay, this is how you're going to be placing the 6 and a half. 6 and a half and a bar. Okay, measure it 6.5 and a bar. That is it. So you keep measuring it like so till you get to the length of the pants. Done connecting the lines together, then around the crotch line here, you also need to curve it. You can just use about half an inch, 1 inch, just to know where, so you don't go too deep. So now this is the crotch. So the next thing to do is to take the dart measurement. So I'll be taking half an inch on both sides of the dart, half an inch on both sides. Taking half an inch on both sides, and then you use 4 inches is the standard. So you come down from the allowance here, come down by 4 inches. Then you connect the dart together. So next thing is, I won't be putting a zipper fly to the front, because I'll be adding the zipper at the side. In case you want to add zipper fly to yours, just measure 2 inches outward like so, and you'll be stopping at the hip line. That is, if you want to add zipper allowance to yours, you measure 2 inches outward and you will stop at the hip line. Okay, so the next thing now is to insert the thigh measurements, your hip measurements, and your waist measurement. So the waist measurement I'm working with is 36 inches. So 36 divided by 4, I have 9, plus the 1 inch for for dart allowance here, you have 10 inches, then plus half an inch for seam allowance, you have 10.5. So this is 10.5 here. So now for the hip, this is the center line. Then you measure the hip. The hip is the quarter of the hip you're working with is 10.5, which is what I have here, plus half inches, you have 11. So this is the 11 here. So around the thigh line I'm working with is 13 inches. Okay, so now 13 inches, now you are going to be taking the 13 inches on both sides. So now you determine the half of 13 inches. Half of 13 inches is 6.5. So that means you'll be taking 6.5 on both sides. So now I have 6.5 here, then 6.5 here. Okay, then you are going to add the half an inch seam allowance that we added at the hip. You also had the half an inch seam allowance here, which is what we have around here. So on this side too, you had half an inch seam allowance. So around here too, you are going to be adding half an inch seam allowance around here. So I would go ahead and add the half an inch seam allowance, because you are going to be joining the two pieces together. So you need half an inch to do that. So this is half an inch. Then you also had half an inch here as well, which is what I have here. This is the half an inch. So now coming to the knee area, so because it's not going to be a fitted pant, so I will use 10 inches for the wideness of this pants. Okay, so that means 10 inches, half of 10 inches is going to be 5 inches. So you can use the quarter of your hip, depends on how wide you want your pants to be. So I want the wideness on fold to be 10 inches. When you open it up, it will be 20 inches. So now for 10 inches, you take half an inch on both sides. But if you want a fitted pant, you can go ahead and use your normal round knee measurement. Okay, so 5 inches here, then 5 inches here, so this is 10 inches. So whatever you have here, you also insert it at the hem of the trouser. So I'll also insert 5 inches here and also 5 inches here too. Now don't forget to add the half an inch seam allowance on both sides. So this is the half an inch seam allowance here and half an inch seam allowance here. You also add it here as well, half an inch seam allowance, half an inch seam allowance, and then you connect all the lines together. So I'm going about the trouser. If you don't want pockets, the front trouser is ready like this. But if you want pockets, now remember this is the half an inch seam allowance around the waist here. Okay, this is the half an inch seam allowance. Don't forget, I'm just trying to mark out the half an inch seam allowance so we don't get confused. So now from the half an inch seam allowance, you go in by 2 inches. Okay, you go in by 2 inches. From the half an inch seam allowance, go in by 2 inches like so, and from there you come down from, make sure you from after the seam allowance, then you come down below the seam allowance, you come down by 6 inches. Okay, by 6 inches. This is the 6 inches and this is the 2 inches. So from these 2 inches to 6 inches, you can slant it. You can slant it like so. You can make it slant like what I'm doing now, or you can just go ahead and curve it down like this. You can curve it like this, like what I'm doing. Can you see? You can curve it like what I just did now, or you can leave it straight, any one you want, and you stop at 6 inches. You can also stop at 5 inches depending on what you want, but 6 inches is okay. Now for the length of the pocket is going to be stopping at your tie line. So when you want to cut out the pocket, make sure that you know you're also going to be adding half an inch seam allowance to the upper part of this pocket. So that means you measure from the top here up to the tie line here, so you have 12 inches. That means the length of your pocket is 12 inches and the width of your pocket is going to be 6.5. okay, this center line is where your pocket will extend to. That will be 6.5, and then you had half an inch on both sides of your pocket. So I'm not going to be cutting the pocket yet. I'm going to use the front to cut the back first before cutting the pocket. So for the dart, you can also notch the dart. Since you are not going to be cutting the dart out, you can just notch it to know where the dart is. So I'm going to be notching the dart. So the next thing is to cut the side here. This is what the front trouser looks like. And you see, it's very simple to make. This is what the front trouser looks like. And then we'll go ahead and cut the back. This is the back bodies. So, and you know the back is going to extend by 2 inches. So how do you know the back is going to extend by 2 inches? So for the back, you measure this center line you have here. you are going to determine the center line you have here, the space you have here. You determine what you have in between from this center line to the center front here. You are not going to measure the seam allowance with it. This center line here, you measure what you have in between. You measure what you have here. So I'll measure what I have from here to this place, and I have 4 1/4. So half of 4 1/4 is about 2 inches and 1 bar, which is around here. Okay, so you are going to mark that upward for the back. So let me just mark. So this waistline here, you are going to extend it. Extend the waistline. You're going to extend the waistline like what I just did now. The waistline, just to let you know what I'm doing. Okay, so now this is what I have here. So this mark here is how much you are going to take off the back. Okay, this is just how much you're going to take off the back to avoid the trouser at the back, to avoid it gaping out or opening up. So that's the essence of taking the 2 inches away from there. Okay, you determine what you have in between this place, divide it by 2, and whatever you have, you measure it upward, which is like this, which is what you have here. So the next thing is the extension. You remember the crotch extension we have around here, which is about 2, which is 2 3/4. Okay, you are going to be measuring it upward, but if I use 2 3/4, it might be too high, so I'll just use 2 inches. 2 inches is okay. So 2 inches is okay. So the crotch extension you have here, I have here, is about 2 3/4. But I'll just use 2 inches. I'll take away the 1/4 of an inch, the 3/4 of an inch away from it, and then use 2 inches upward. So this will enable, this is just for the back to accommodate the butt. Okay, that's why you are extending the waist at the back by 2 inches, so it can accommodate the butt. So I'm using 2 inches. It depends on what your crotch extension is. You can use the 2 1/2 if you want. If your crotch extension is 2 inches, you can use 1 1/2, and you can use the whole 2 inches if you want, and you can use 2 1/2. But 2 inches is okay for all, you know, all bodies. But 2 inches is okay. So I'll measure the 2 inches upward. Remember that there is 1/2 inch seam allowance here already. Okay, so that means when I'm taking 2 inches upward, I'm not going to be adding extra 1/2 inch to the waistline again. But if I still want to add 1/2 inch to the waistline, that means when I'm taking the 2 inches, I have to take it below the seam allowance. But if I'm taking it above the seam allowance, that means I won't be adding any seam allowance here again. So I'll just mark it like so and extend this line. So from there now, you are going to slant it and connect it back to the waist. Now you now need to measure what you have around the waist here minus the seam allowance you have at the center line here, and you measure what you have here. I have 10 1/2 here plus the side seam allowance. I have 10 1/2. Then you measure the 10 1/2, which is what I have around here. So this is the 10 1/2. So this is the 10 1/2 mark, and then you connect it from here to the 10 1/2 mark. Then remember so can you see now? So the next thing to do is to take the back measurement. So from the back here, below the seam allowance, this is the 1/2 inch seam allowance. Below it, this is the actual crotch line. Okay, so at the crotch line here, you come down by 1/2 inch. Come down by 1/2 inch. This is 1/2 inch. Okay, so for the crotch line, you come out by 2 inches. I'm coming out by 2 inches. I'm coming out by 2 inches, which is here. And at the nail line, you come out by 1 inch. come out by 1 inch, and at the hem line you also come out by 1 inch. Okay, so this side too, for the side here to correspond with what we have here, you also need to come out by 1 inch. You need to come out by 1 inch around here, and also around here. Just measure the 1 inch. Measure the 1 inch, and you also connect to this place. So then you connect to the waistline here. So this is what you have on this side. So now on this side, for the back, just for you to know how the back is going to be, you come out like 2 inches for the back. When I wanted to curve the front here, I came like 1 inch. So for this one, you're going to come out by about 2 inches here, and then from that 2 inches you connect to this half an inch here. Remember that the 2 inches, the half an inch for the seam allowance is not included. You had it like so, you take it to the half an inch that you came down from here. Can you see? And from there you are going to connect to this place. So I'll just bring this up like this. Okay, and then from here now you are going to connect to this place. So I'll just use the curve ruler, the pattern master. So you're going to be using the pattern master. Just make sure you do the right thing. Okay, so you should have something like this when you are done, and then you connect all the lines together as well. And remember to also input the back dart as well. Just measure what we have at the dart here. Can you see? We have around 4 1/4. Then you measure that 4 1/4, measure it here, can you see? So that's how the back dart is going to look like. And the back dart, remember that the half an inch for seam allowance is here already, so the back dart is going to be 1 inch longer than the front dart. So that's, the front dart is 4 inches plus half an inch seam allowance, 4 1/2. So the back dart is going to be 5 1/2. So this is what we have. You're just going to connect it like so, and then you take half an inch on both sides as well. Take half an inch on both sides, and then you connect the dart for the back as well. And then remember to connect that, and then remember to take half an inch seam allowance around this center back too. You are going to be joining the two pieces together. So, and the back is also ready. So don't worry about all the allowances we took there. By the time you start joining, you can cut off the excess when you start joining. So I'll go ahead and cut it out. So you're also going to notch the back dart. So we are done for the back as well. So this is the back. Okay, so guys, for the pockets, all you need to do is to measure what you have here, and you'll be using the biggest part of the side here, and which the hip is the biggest side here. So I'll just measure what I have here, which is 7.5. So that 7.5 is what I also, there's 7 inches, which is what I have here. I've already marked it out here. So all you need to do is place this, okay, place it on it like so. What you now do is to place this on it, and you see, place it on it and trace out that waist area and that hip area. Can you see? You trace it out by just cutting it, then you shift it upward, because I already measured the waist seam allowance with the length, together with the length, and also the seam allowance for the lower part. I've also added it with it. So the only seam allowance I'm adding is just for the one at this side alone. At the waist side here, seam allowance is already there. At the side seam here, there is seam allowance there already, and at the lower part here, I've already added seam allowance. The only place that is left to be adding seam allowance is this place right here. So I'll just place it on the waist area like this, and then I will trace it out. I'll trace out what I have here. So I'm done tracing it out. So for this one, you are going to leave this one the way it is. You aren't doing anything to this one again. So this one is what we are going to face now. So now I'll come back to the front and cut out the pockets for the front. Let's make sure you measure out the seam allowance. I'll be leaving it straight like this. Okay, so I'll just leave half an inch seam allowance. You measure it out, so that when you are cutting, you'll be cutting from the seam allowance. Okay, so now I'm going to place this right here under the trouser so that I can cut it together. Remember, this curved part is going inside, so make sure it matches with the trouser. The shape around the side seam should match with the trouser, cut from the seam allowance you created here. So you cut it like so. So this side now is where the pocket is going to be. So when you are placing it, you place it like so. Can you see? You place it like this, then you bring this one. Can you see it's matching? Can you see they are both matching? The other one will be like this. Okay, can you see what I have here now? So before you start sewing to the trouser, make sure you secure this place. You are going to sew from here to this place. You leave this place so that you'll be able to sew this edge to the trouser, and then you stitch it with the side of the trouser when you are done. The same thing here. So when you want to stitch, I might just do a video of how I'm going to be stitching it together. So what that means is you are going to be sewing this part of the pocket to this to this one that will cut out, that will cut off, you are going to sew it here. So which means this one now is going to stand, this pieces here now is going to stand as the pieces we cut off from here. Can you see? So that's what is going to replace the pieces we cut off from here. So for the band, you are going to measure what you have for the band. So for the band, I have 36 inches. For the waist is 36 inches. So you can decide to join your trouser together first before putting your band, or you can just cut the front band and the back band. You can cut them separately so that you'll be able to join on the side, and then you put your zipper allowance at the side.